So thank you for coming. So my name is Kim Fredrickson. I work for SUSE, as you can see. I'm based out of Cape Town, South Africa. Don't get confused with my accent. I'm actually from Denmark. And I spent quite a few years in Germany as well, so I can speak fluent German as well. So I worked many years in support, consulting, and in the last 2 years, almost, I've been working as a sales engineer. So today we're going to talk about SUSE Manager for Retail. How many here knows our product on SUSE Manager for Retail, SUSE Manager, or SUSE Linux Enterprise Point of Service? So you all know Sleepos, SUSE Manager, and SUSE Manager for Retail. You don't know the retail, but you know the other two, okay? And the rest of you? You not? Okay. All right. No, that's cool. That's good. So just as a quick recap, SUSE Manager for Retail is based on SUSE Manager, which is our best-in-class open source infrastructure management solution. However, what we've done is we've added quite a few retail features in there to make it a use case for the retail industry. There are many SUSE Manager slides that will go a lot more in depth to this, but let's just highlight some of the key points of SUSE Manager and why SUSE Manager is the right platform for us to deliver the new retail solution. All right, as it's SUSE Manager as part of our software-defined infrastructure, it obviously helps you to optimize your operations, reduce your cost, reduce your complexity, make sure you're compliant, and it increases the reliability of your servers by the fact that you can then monitor all of your your servers and make sure they are patched. That's just a standard SUSE Manager slide. We won't spend too much on it. So one of the ways that we can do that is that you obviously have a whole bunch of servers that you need to manage, or in this case, it can also be your point of service devices, right? And one of the things that we can do is if you got a problem and you need to install a patch on any of these machines, right? Instead of having to go to each and every one of them, you can simply just do a single one command from the centralized UI, and boom, all your machines are patched. That's the big benefit of SUSE Manager, is that you manage everything from a single central UI. Right? And for those of you who are lazy or live by the beach, yes, it does work from the iPad. I use it myself on my server at home. So it's really cool. Very good interface. All right? So that's how we can manage and maintain the servers in a sense. And another way that we reduce the complexity with SUSE Manager is that we can manage all of these various SUSE Linux Enterprise servers running on all of these different platforms, but we can also manage the Red Hats of the world, if you want to get into that. And if you go out to our technology booth, you will see that also we already now have in tech preview for current version, we have the Ubuntu support, which is going to be coming as well. So we can do all of this, and it will be on all of these various platforms. And I'm sure if you know SUSE Manager, you've seen all of these. Then we come back to where do we do what's also important besides that we can manage and maintain in order to stay compliant with the security policies. That's where the SUSE Manager helps you again. One of the ways that you can do that is you can search for the CVE numbers. You can look for that, and to make sure that you stay compliant with the IT policies and the security policies, you can use your OpenSCAP reports and functionality to make sure. Does everybody know what CVE is? You're all familiar with that? You as well? Okay. So the CVE, remember when there is a security issue, and there will sometimes be an announcement from some of these security companies. They give it a score and a number. Those are the CVE, stands for Common Vulnerability. And what's the E for? I always forget. Correct, thank you. Oh, there you go, there you go. Well, just read the slide, I'm trying. Hey, there we go. So what happens is they're all given a number. So the first number is the year, like 2018, 2019, and then it gives a number. They're just continuously rolling number. What happens is that you can search, if the security guys comes and says, hey, CVE 2019 55 20, how's that affecting us? You sit there and say, huh? All you do is you go into SUSE Manager and you type it in. And then SUSE Manager will tell you, this is your exposure. Do you need to patch? Do you not need to patch? Where are the patches in with SUSE Manager, your cloning or your channels and all of this, your patch lifecycle, where are the patches? All of that you can see. And again, of course, from your single UI, right? So that's where the SUSE Manager helps you to do these things. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we can manage, not only with SUSE Manager, but also SUSE Manager for retail, we can manage anything you have from a retail perspective, from the store to the core to the cloud. All right? So that will be, again, we don't really care, as you saw on the other slide, where you run the stuff. If you want to run it on-prem, in the cloud, we can help you with that. All right? That was just a quick 2-second, 30-second recap on the SUSE Manager. So what is it that SUSE has in the retail space, or what have we had? We are about the only enterprise Linux company that has a retail offering on the enterprise level. Okay, so where have we been? As you can see, it's not a new thing. We've actually had this for a very long time. It's existed under various names, depending on who owns the company and what corporations we were doing. But the latest, and most of you probably will be familiar with, is the SUSE Linux Enterprise Point of Service 11SP3. That one we still have a lot of running out of. And now, of course, where we are now, we are at the SUSE Manager for Retail 3.2. That's the latest. All right? So the old solution that we were having, what was it, and how does it fit into our modern structure? So it was basically a three-tier structure. You had your admin server in your central location with your image building server. Then you had your branch server. So that was obviously in the branch. You had a SLES server, SUSE Linux Enterprise server. And then you had your point of service devices. So that was your three tiers of how we had structured that solution. Sorry. And you would basically, from the admin, you would manage the stuff, you would ship it out to the branch, and eventually you would put it onto your point of service devices, right? So that's the old structure. How does that look in the new setup? Because remember, we are now running a SUSE Manager server, right? So in the new setup, this is really what the architecture looks from a high-level point of view. Okay, I'll show you another slide just now, but we still have the same three-tier structure that you're very familiar with, right? But SUSE Manager for Retail, at its core, has the SUSE Manager, right? With all the benefits that we have from SUSE Manager, right? That also means that we will automatically get all our updates from the SUSE Customer Center. You can hook in third-party repositories, as you all know. If you don't want the SUSE Manager for various security reasons to be able to have access going out to the internet, right? It's only an outbound connectivity that we need. If you don't want to have that from a security perspective, you can always use the SMT, the subscription management tool, to decouple the SUSE Manager from outside. So all of those facilities are still available in the central location, right? Now, what you may have noticed, if you're familiar with our SUSE Manager slides, we've got a little new thing sitting over here. It's called a Kiwi Build Server, all right? So with the retail offering, we need images to put on the point of service devices, all right? For that, we use images, so we build an image. Now, what we can do with SUSE Manager is we designate a special server to be the Kiwi Build Host server, and we build the images straight on this. Gets automatically added to the SUSE Manager, and we can then deploy it out, okay? So how do we deploy it out? Well, we get to our three-tier structure. You may have noticed here, it says it's a SUSE Manager for Retail branch server. That's another of the new components that we have that sits here. And it's basically, in essence, it's a standard SUSE Linux Enterprise server with a SUSE Manager proxy, where we then add all the retail features in to the SUSE Manager proxy. And that basically turns it into the retail branch server, okay? And at the bottom, as before, we have our point of service devices, right? Yep.
Can you use SUSE Manager for retail with standalone SLES server? Not POS, but SLES server?
Yes, I'll cover that later. I've got some slides on different deployment scenarios. And if that doesn't answer your question, just ask again. I've got that coming up. All right? So that was the high-level overview of what SUSE Manager looks like. So here is another way just to try and relate the existing point of service devices that we had to the new setup. So you can see it's still a three-tier setup. Nothing really changes much on that side. It's just how we do it. So we take the admin server, which was your central server. That gets replaced by our SUSE Manager server. We take our branch server, which we call the SUSE Linux Enterprise Point of Service branch server, and we replace it with the SUSE Manager Retail branch server. And the point of service devices stays the same. Okay, so there's not much from that perspective. All right, but the key difference is the SUSE Linux Enterprise Point of Service was an image-based solution. It really only cared about building and delivering the image to your point of service. After that, he was like, okay, my work's done. And today what we've taken is with the SUSE Manager for retail, we are taking and propelling that solution into the modern environment where you need all of the features, as you see on the list here. You need the package management, patch management, you need security, compliance. All of these things you can now do with the SUSE Manager for retail solution. All right. So let's take a quick closer look at past, present, and future. So what did we have? What do we have today? And where are we going with our solutions? All right. So we just covered that. That's the past solution that we have. That was the offering that we were using, which is in the point of service device. As I said, it was a free tier solution. One of the key differences was that we were using a standard server, and we were using, for the more technically minded on you, we were doing an add-on product. Okay, that in itself presents a bit of an issue. So that's one of the reasons why we don't use it as an add-on product anymore with /12s. Okay. So at present, what you will find is that if you go talk to us and you're looking at our price list and our SKUs and you're getting quotes if you want to go into this direction, you will still see the name SUSE Linux Enterprise Point of Service being used. You will get quotes on this from us as well, because the subscriptions related to your point of service devices, we haven't changed. That stays the same. But it's now referring to being a client-only product. So it only relates to this point here. Okay? So it's a little bit confusing. We're still using both names, but it just, in a retail environment, you'll get quotes for SUSE Manager for retail, and you will get point of service in your listings as well, right? So the new setup, from a product name perspective that you will be using, and the names, as you can see, we got our SUSE Manager as a central server, we got our SUSE Manager retail branch, and the third subscription you will have is the SUSE Linux Enterprise Point of Service clients. Okay, so that's how it's structured together today. Okay, it's important to know with the question that you had, because when you combine all of these three together, we unlock the feature that gives you what's called the SUSE Lifecycle Management subscriptions. So you can manage everything using SUSE Manager. We only do that when you buy these three products together. Right? It's part of how we are trying to make everything fit, both for the retail and for normal SUSE Manager. Okay? So now some of you might have asked, what is actually the difference between SUSE Manager and SUSE Manager for retail? All right? As you can see, we have the standard SUSE Manager over here, all right, and we got the SUSE with the SUSE Manager proxy underneath. Actually, the biggest difference between them is the use case. From a software perspective, there's hardly any difference. It's basically the use case, and because of the use case, there is a significant price difference when you get into saying we're going to use a retail branch server together with the clients. We then unlock the extra features of saying, you get to manage everything, unlike in this setup, well, in this setup over here, okay? But technically, the branch server is simply just a SUSE Manager proxy that we just enhance with some additional features, okay? All right, deployment scenarios. What we can see on the deployment scenarios is our classical scenario, right? This is what we've had for many years. And obviously that's the easiest one to deploy, which is simply you have the centralized server where you got your image building, your SUSE Manager. In the store, you got a branch server, and all it does is it looks after your point of service devices. That's the easiest solution from a management and how to deal with and set up. All you do is you set up the SUSE Manager server, you set up the image building, you create the branch server, you do your retail configuration components, build the image, and you boot the tills. You're done, right? So that's the one scenario. The other scenario that we have, which we can deploy, is this one. So it's basically the same as before, except that we got a third location, which would be a different site, different data center, your backup site, your different room next door. And in that case, what you would do is you would put a SUSE Manager proxy in here, and then you would manage these instances here, all right? That's another way. Remember, you're still using a standard SUSE Manager to manage everything. Right? So you now manage both all your stores plus whatever other data centers you have. Right? And the third scenario that I listed up here is one where you're saying, well, in the store, I'm managing not only my point of service devices, but I'm also managing other servers. And that's, then your setup would look something like this. All right? And that's, all of these are of course supported. And then the last one, that is also nowadays what a lot of people, we are seeing people are doing, is they don't have a branch server. They just don't need it. Obviously, that does require some extra bandwidth on the WAN side for your internet link, because if you have to re-image the clients, but they don't have to be re-imaged via Pixie Boot. There are also other options, but obviously, from ease of point of use, Pixie is the easiest to do. All right. Yep.
And this is just a point of terminology clarification from you guys across the pond. I've heard you guys use the term till with respect to this product. Is that the point of sale terminal?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know what you guys were talking about when you were talking about the till.
No, yeah. No, I don't know about England, but in South Africa, you go to the till, right? The word cash register also doesn't get used. It's called a till. So yeah, I try and use point of service device because that kind of covers most of the things. Because what I found when you work with retailers, but I'm sure you've seen yourself, you go to a store, you got the actual cash register, in the lanes. You got 20, 30, 40 lanes where you can go buy your stuff. But if you go to the kiosk and you want to buy lottos and all of these other things, that's also part of this solution. Therefore, that's a point of service device. It will just run a different image with different applications, right? Okay. So there are a lot, but that's just some of the deployment scenarios. You can do a lot of things yourself. And obviously, if you got any issues or questions around how can I do a certain solution, please come talk to us. The product, especially now that we're based on SUSE Manager, is extremely flexible because we are using the base SUSE Manager code. So there are lots of options. And what we also know is the retail industry is changing in the way they do things. I mean, we have requests for people, they want to use handheld devices, which presents another whole host of problems because it's not as easy to Pixie Boot, your tablet type of thing, But these requests are coming, and we can also see what the hardware vendors are doing. They're delivering point of service devices now, which are a tablet, right? So we now need to work on that. So if you've got any of those things, please come talk to us. Our engineering and our product manager, I know him well, is really keen on all of these new developments. He actually got a session on, I think it's Friday morning, he's got a session on retail future, on how he perceives what's going to happen in the retail industry. Okay. So let's have a quick look again at what do we currently have in our version, which is 3.2 of SUSE Manager for Retail. So we've seen this before. We get all the benefits of deployment, provisioning, the patch management, all of this that is in SUSE Manager. We get all of this now, and we get it as part of the subscription for all of our point of service devices. Right? Obviously, what we're going to be using now, of course, we're going to be using some more of the imaging and deployment technology when it comes to the retail industry, right? So, and why is SUSE Manager in this case a good way to do it? Well, because we are just leveraging the user interface, which you all know. It's an easy, simple way to see things. If you ever worked with the older product, if you were good at LDAP, it was an easy thing to use. If you weren't good at LDAP, you would struggle, right? So we're getting all of those benefits from the SUSE Manager, right? So obviously what we can do now, though, as compared to the old version is, we can now build images from the GUI. All you do is click, right? Obviously, you need to create the image or configure the image, so it's still done using a config.xml file. But you can now make it available through any other means that you know. I mean, if you want to use GitHub to version control the stuff that you make yourself, go ahead. As long as the SUSE Manager can talk to the outside, it can use a GitHub repository. You can have something running internally, can be an FTP site, an HTTP site. It doesn't really matter. It's up to you how you want to do the version controlling on the file itself, right? To make sure you don't do weird stuff. And then all you do is in the SUSE Manager, when you need to build it, you go into SUSE Manager, you say, okay, I want to build this image. All right? And if we've got enough time, I'll show you some of those new screens that we have. All right? And the nice thing is once it's built, it's automatically imported to the SUSE Manager and it's available to be used. Not like in the old version where you had to start using command line and then you couldn't remember the LDAP command and all of those things. So once we've done that, once it's available in the SUSE Manager, we need to get it to the branch stores. Okay? So we synchronize the image out like we did in the old days. We synchronize it out to the branch. But all of this now is done by Salt. So we use Salt to get it out to the branch server. We use Salt formulas to configure all the necessary network services that we need. You don't have to sit and do it yourself. Salt does all of that for you, and you just say apply. And then the server gets reconfigured for those things. And I'll show you that later. I've fired up all my images, so that should all be running. And then basically, once you're at that point, it's basically just you go out and you start your point of service terminals, and they start pixie booting, and they apply the image. All right? It is as that simple nowadays. All right, so your infrastructure in the store basically looks like this. So you got your central location. There's you doing all the work. I didn't put the logo for the beach though. I forgot about that. I'll do that next time. Then you got your SUSE Manager, you got your build host, and then you got all the stores going across. And now remember, because we're using SUSE Manager and we're using Salt, it scales really well. The old solution had some issues once you started approaching like 500, 1,000 type of stores or branch stores. It got a little bit twitchy sometimes. This stuff is not a problem. We could scale. All right. Okay. So now that we got all of this up and running, we got the SUSE Manager, we got the build host, we got the branch service, we got all the point of service terminals. We now have all of these registered in the SUSE Manager. Right? So we can see them like we can with any other server, which brings us the benefit that we now have access to all the SUSE Manager features for life cycling your hardware and your software on these point of service devices. Right? So we got full access to the asset management. We can see the hardware software system. We can do reports. We can even go check with the subscription matching. We can check where, if you want to go in and classify and type things in about them, you can do all of this stuff we now have available in the SUSE Manager, which we previously didn't. So you can actually view and see what is it for devices I have out in the stores, right? And you can obviously see all of the information over here where you can see, you can see the names, the IP addresses. Okay, that's maybe not a good example, says Hyper-V as the platform, right? And you can see all of the things that we have here. So you don't need to have that lane 1, cache register 1, is always IP51. You don't have to, because you can always go look up the IP address in SUSE Manager when you need to find out what it is. So you can, if you want to go away from that complexity, which I know a lot of people do because it makes life easier, but it's a lot of manual work to get up and running. You don't really need it. SUSE Manager tells you all of these things, right? So, so we also get the configuration management because we now have Salt, so we can manage your configuration on the till side. But what we also get is we get the software the full software package and management stack, which we previously didn't have. Right? In the older solution, if you had to patch the point of service devices, you had to create a new image, you had to go through the testing, then you had to import it, then you had to sync it out to all the servers, and then you had to go deploy it to all the point of service branches. If you're going to deploy a security fix, and you got to do it very quickly, that takes time. Because we now have everything in SUSE Manager, we got access to full patch management like you know from all the servers. Right? So obviously we can do complete patching like you saw before. We have access to all the information about the patches. What are they fixed? Are they necessary? So you can make an informed decision and say, do I need to roll this out? Do I need to make them reboot or whatever it is I need to do? Okay? Yeah, and of course, I didn't mention that earlier, but do you all know what is meant by content staging? Okay, you're nodding, you guys are not. Okay, so remember, we update patches, let's say every day from SUSE Customer Center. Your SUSE Manager puts that into your SUSE channels. But so if you update your dev server today and you spend a week testing, you update your QA server next week, what level is it getting? It's getting the latest level, not where you test it. So you haven't really verified anything, have you? because you're in a new level. So that's what SUSE Manager as a whole helps you, is what you say, we take the SUSE channels that they deliver every day, we get all the latest, we grab a copy, a snapshot, we call actually in the product, it's called a clone. So we clone that channel. Now so this one keeps updating, but the dev channel stays static. It does not change until you do it again. So you do all your testing. Next week you take it and say, no, now clone the dev into QA. So when you get to the QA, you know that it's a dev channel. And that's how that's content staging. It's one of the key features of SUSE Manager that allows you to go in and explain to the business, besides all the testing we do, you guys have also done extensive testing in your environment, so the chance of something goes wrong is basically 99.99% sure that you're not going to have a problem. You can add however many nines you want. Okay? So, but besides the patch management, we also now have access to full configuration management using Salt. So we can, through Salt, say, on the point of service devices, I need these config files to have this information. Even if somebody is able to figure out how to change it, you can get Salt just to say, no, I'll change it back. Or you can go in and say, well, we're putting in new credit card machines. It's a new brand. So we need to change the config. You can do it through here and roll it out using, instead of sending out a new image with all the new configs in, you can do it through the configuration management. Okay? And because we're in SUSE Manager, if in case you haven't noticed, we also have access to the System Set Manager. Right? So the System Set Manager is a way of SUSE Manager helping you to manage multiple machines without actually going through the trouble of saying, create a group, put them in the group. You simply just select all of these that you want, and then you go into the System Set Manager and you can do what you want. So I can patch in one go a Red Hat box, a Ubuntu box, a SUSE box, a SAP box, different OS versions, and three different types of tills. I can patch them at the same time. I just say patch to the latest version. SUSE Manager figures out which patch goes to which machine, right? But that is like 5 clicks in System Set Manager, and it's up and running. That's the power of the System Set Manager. And of course, we get all the security compliance, and you also get access to the system currency report now, because it's a normal machine, so you can see all of these things regarding how am I affected, not affected, patched, not patched when it comes to the CV numbers. All of this you get for every point of service device. All right. So that's the backend infrastructure, which is the SUSE Manager and the SUSE Manager Retail Branch Server. Okay. There are some key issues that you need to be aware of when it comes to the actual point of service device itself. Okay. And this relates to the fact that a lot of the retail industry people, if the point of service device is 8 years old, that's still got at least 5 years to live. So they sweat their assets big time. I mean, we are working on some deals. Some of the machines are 32-bit only. That's how old they are. When did you last have a machine that was 32-bit only? And that's actually, they got a significant chunk of that. So, it becomes a key issue. And that's part of, so let's have a look at that, because there are some key issues you need to know about that. One thing is that the SUSE Linux Enterprise Point of Service client is actually supported until March 31st, 2025. Even though that the code base is a standard SUSE Linux Enterprise server 12 SP3 or SP4. Okay, on the normal server, you're never going to get this. Okay, but on the client side, you do get it. Okay. Obviously, there come some restrictions because we can't support everything, and we'll cover those a little bit later as well. All right. So you will see, by the way, we have it on here. The legacy stack, so that's the 11 SP3. That's a 32-bit stack only. That's running till 2022. So 11 SP3, 32-bit in a point of service device is still a fully supported operating system. Okay. We just can't support for 11 SP4 this Sunday. Remember, 11 SP4, 31st of March, 2019, it's out of support. Okay. So, as I was saying with they like to sweat the assets, that means that we are giving them extended lifecycle. That's part of that subscription that is provided. Here are the dates again. Right? What's important is it's not for all packages in the code base. It's for those typically used in the use case of a cash register or point of service device. All right. If you have a solution where you would think this might be a problem for you, this statement, that you don't perceive that as a full retail environment or something like that, give us a call. All right. We are really keen on other opportunities in these areas as well. So if you got anything, give us a shout and we'll see what we can do. Okay. Some important dates to be aware of when it comes to the point of service clients. As I said, they're supported until 2025. However, please be, I would say the most important one is this line here. Okay. So by enabling of new hardware, what we mean by that is like the new processors coming out, new network drivers, those type of things, right? We will make that on best effort basis. We'll put that into the code base based on these two dates, okay? Why do we see best effort basis? Because it may be that the driver is not meant, can't work on that kernel version. So we can't always guarantee it. If the driver, manufacturer driver, let's say Intel for network cards or something, if they make it for a kernel version of 4.8 or something like that, and we're only using 4.4, we can't backport it, you know, potentially that can exist. But that's probably the two dates that you really want to be worried about. Okay. So where do we go from here now? So if you currently have an implementation of SUSE Linux Enterprise Point of Service, how do you get to retail? Right? So how do we convert the solution? All right. So just as a refresher, you've seen this slide before, right? So we have the free tier setup. It's based on a /11 SP4 server backend, remember, and it's an add-on product. Okay, that's where we are. Some key dates to remember. I mentioned it before. Unless you have purchased LTSS, your retail solution today based on SUSE Linux Enterprise Point of Service 11 SP3 on the server side is no longer supported. The client will go to 2022. The server code, unless you bought LTSS, ran out last week. Okay? So, what is the migration path? Notice it says migration, not in-place upgrade. All right? So how do we get from the top to the bottom? The reason it says that it's not a migration path is there's too many changes. If you attend some of the other sessions, you know there's a lot of changes between 11 and 12, and it just has a level of complexity that's not really worth dealing with from a endpoint perspective. It is much simpler simply just to install a new server and then migrate the data over. Okay, remember we are talking about SUSE Manager proxy. There, all of the configuration is done on the SUSE Manager side. Nothing is done in the branch. You ship it out via the SUSE Manager once you convert it. Also gives the benefit that you can take advantage of BTRFS, BetaFS, BataFS, pick the name that you want. You all know, if you don't know what that is, come talk to me afterwards. It's one of my lovely, I love it. Saved my bacon quite a few times. All right. So this is where we're going to go. And also notice we've also, in this slide, we've also going to be upgrading the tills. Again, as I said before, 32-bit, this is 64. Keep that in mind if you're into this scenario, that all of the physical devices, don't be shocked if they can't handle 64-bit code. Don't be. Okay? So if you want to do a migration, I would highly encourage you to contact the consulting services. Through them, you get very quick access to all the engineering guys, and they can really help you out. If you got a large installation, you can even send them a copy of your LDAP database, and the engineering team will happily have a look at it and try and run it on their test setup to see does it work or not. Right? They're really keen on helping with this to make sure that your transition goes smoothly and has a limited amount of downtime as possible. All right. Okay. So here listed 3 different scenarios of where you are in terms of your setup. And I'm sure that, as it says, I'm sure there's multiple versions, but basically you got a setup where you have a mix of old and new in terms of you got a SUSE Manager, you already have a SUSE Manager proxy, none of that retail related. You got your retail setup, There's another one where you have a SUSE Manager, but you got no proxies. And then there's the simple one at the bottom, which is you have this the point of service admin server and the branch server, and that's it. Okay? And everybody gets one guess which one we're going to start with. The simple one, of course. Take the easy one first. So if you have a current solution today, the simple way to migrate is you simply start out by installing your SUSE Manager on a 12SP4 nowadays, 12SP4 and a SUSE Manager in your same location, your data center as the admin server. That's your first starting point. Okay? And this installation will not affect anything on your old setup. Has no effect. So you can do that even, without any worry. Once you've done that, then you can migrate the data from the old LDAP tree into the SUSE Manager. Again, this does not affect your production, because all you do is you grab a copy and you copy it onto the SUSE Manager, you run a conversion script, and you import the thing. All right? So it does not affect it. Right? And the way that when you export it out, you can either say, if you've got a very, very large environment, you can say, no, I'll just try 1 or 2 branches and see if I can get it to work. Or you can take the whole thing. Okay? Once you've done all of that, then your next step is to go look at how do I do the branches. Okay? There, of course, now we start to say you are getting into an area where you might affecting what happens in the branch, right? So you would need to have to start installing the SUSE Manager branch server, right? You can install that, but obviously once you deploy the retail components, that will be your DNS, DHCP, and your PXE, then you obviously need to worry what happens in the store, right? So that's where you got to be careful. And then obviously the way you migrate is if you do one branch at a time, and then once you're done, you'll get to a point where you've done all the branches, so you basically just shut down and decommission the admin server. Classical migration path to do it. All right? It's a bit of work, but the benefit is that because you're now based on a standard SUSE Manager code, whatever SUSE Manager can do in terms of in-place upgrade on the OS level and the next version, which is SUSE Manager 4.0, we get all of that in a retail environment as well, because we inherit, we just do slight extensions to the existing SUSE Manager code. So you gotta do that step once, but after that, whatever SUSE Manager can do, we can do. So basically, the point of service is that once you get to the point where you migrate the branch, it's a good question, I didn't have it on the slide. Once you get it to the SUSE Manager retail branch server, you would at that same time, when you reboot the point of service devices, you would then put the new 64-bit image on. Okay? But so yes, there is some work to do on the image side as well to get a new image up and running and all of that. That is absolutely correct.
So what if the customer has these 32-bit devices you were talking about? Do they have to replace those devices?
Yes. Okay. You can if you want to. Then you need to get a hold of us through consulting and engineering. We can make it work that if the branch only has 32-bit, we can make it work. If it only has 64, we can make it work. We cannot run mix and match because of the PXE code. And this is only if you PXE boot. If you're not PXE booting, there's other ways around the stuff. But effectively, you need to look at it because remember, the 32-bit's only supported till 2022 anyway. So you need to get them into a point where they got to go upgrade to 64-bit anyway, right? So yeah, but you can, of course, if you got that, you will have to look at saying, well, if all those branches has got 32 bits in, I can keep them running on the old system until then, right? If it's a large installation, how quickly can you do it anyway? But yes, you will have to replace them. All right. Okay. So how are we doing for time? We're almost done. All right, so just a quick, there is a roadmap. I don't know if you can see it in the back, it's a bit on the busy side. So that's the standard SUSE Manager roadmap slide, right, where you can see all the things that are coming in the SUSE Manager. Some of the things that I'm waiting for, which I find, where we listed that, have we got it on here somewhere? Can't even see it now. Yeah, there it is, I was looking for it, here. That we get support for Debian, CentOS, and whatever. They're working on that. We already have it now in 3.2.6, I think it is, it's tech preview. So that's the standard SUSE Manager slide. So all of these features that you see here will be coming to SUSE Manager for retail because it's based on the SUSE Manager. Okay? As with anything, obviously, these are only target dates. There's no guarantee we'll stick to those. Then on the retail side, you will see that there is also a roadmap for the retail components. right? And one of the things that will be of interest is that we will get in 3.2, there are some issues if the network's down or the branch server is not there. There are certain things that doesn't work, all right? And that will be fixed. That what we call offline store capability. That stuff is coming in 4.0, all right? Which is in June, I think, is the target date at the moment. So we are doing that. And obviously, as we're going forward, you will see here that we still have the 12SP4, and I can't find it right now, but somewhere here they will also be oh, here it is. They will also be looking at getting 15/15 in as the client, right? But it's not going to come immediately. You can see it's only going to come with the later versions that we're going to get the 15 as an endpoint client, okay? Oop. All right, so that was the slide deck. So what I was going to do now was I was going to go and show you, then I need to go here and say unified. I didn't like that. Let's try that again. Okay. Oh, it would help if I clicked apply, wouldn't it? There we go. So you've all seen SUSE Manager. You know what it looks like, right? So in here in SUSE Manager, we have a branch server here. So all the cool stuff that we do is now underneath here. That's where we have all the information regarding the branch server. All right, so here we will see, here's the branch server setup. What is it, is it one-legged or two-legged in the network setup? All of this information is in here. Here's the information about how to set up the Pixie. All of this we now define in the SUSE Manager console in the central location, and we simply just apply it out using the high states here once we've done the configuration. No need to worry. All of this that it's in here, you don't have to type it in manually. We do have a command line, which you can then use for scripting. So and all that command line does is just fill out these forms. It doesn't deploy it. Just fill out the forms for you, and then you can go check it, and then apply the high state to send it out. If you know what you're doing, you can also be adventurous and just apply the high state after you've done the form and say, hey, hopefully it works. Okay? So you may remember that we had the hardware types in the point of service devices in the older product. We are realizing that today by using the system groups. Okay? So they have to be named like that. The first one, that's a standard virtualized machine. I then hard-coded, a bit of fun, I hard-coded the BIOS names and the manufacturer name in my VM, so therefore I've got that other hardware group. Okay? That's how we assign the hardware to the right group, because that's how we get the right image on the hardware, in case you have different images for different hardwares. Okay? All right. So let's have a look. I've got here a machine. It's an existing point of service device. It's all working, and all I do is boot it up. Okay? So what the first thing it does, it goes in and does the Pixie, gets an IP address, like we all know, and now it loads the image from the that are built. Okay? And it boots up my machine. I am running the right resolution. Ah, well. Okay? And then that's the standard enterprise server screen that it boots up. And it should come any second now. Yes, any second now. Come. Nice machine. Nice machine. See, there we go. Comes up with the terminal ID and the salt fingerprint. Okay? So what it does now, it goes and contacts the SUSE Manager branch server, and it should boot any second now. There you go. So now it's checked on the server side. Am I still registered? Am I part of the SUSE Manager setup? Is there a new image for me? No, there's not. Okay, there you go. I'm booting the system. All right? And that's basically it. Now it's up and running. Okay? So how does it look for a new one? If you want, that was underneath. So if I need a new one, so what I did was I've created a little script that all it does is it automatically creates a fourth machine and it starts it. And here's a new machine coming up. Okay, so that's a new machine that is not part of my current SUSE, brand new machine I'm firing up. So it's the same boot process, right? And it will go through that. And any second now, it will pop up with the thing and say my terminal ID and my fingerprint. Remember, we are salt based, right? So everything runs on salt. That's why we need the fingerprint so we can get the salt master to accept that he's allowed to talk to the minion, or minion allowed to talk to the master, right? So we're using all of that. So we're just waiting for it. Nice machine. Nice machine. Yeah, come. See, there we go. Okay. So he's obviously not going to go any further because we have not accepted the key. So all we do is you go in here and you'll see there's a key waiting here. See that line here? That's the key that you will see. Now, obviously, you can verify the key. So if you're quick, you will see that that is the right key. And I'll verify that because I know all of this by heart. So I'm just going to accept the key and say go. Okay. There is a hack if you do large deployments and you just want to auto accept this. There is a hack available for it to do it. So you don't have to sit and do every one of them. Okay. That is available. So where's my machine? Yeah. And then as soon as the server here, you will see if I refresh in here. So what I'm waiting for is for the SUSE Manager to create the machine. You couldn't see it here, but now this one turned blue, which means I can click on it. So now it's been created as a machine. And the minute that happened, it started downloading the image. So it goes from the client to the proxy to the SUSE Manager. He creates it like he would create a registration, but it's not full yet. He just does the basics. And then he can say, okay, that's hardware, that image, and he sends the command back for the branch server to say, hey, go deliver that image. And that's what he's doing. All right? And then you will see that we do quite a lot of things in here. So you'll see all the salt states. So he's now busy applying. You can't really read that so well, but it says here it's busy applying salt boot. That's one of the extensions that we did. Created all of this so we could do a salt boot. All right. So he's booting the system. So we should see any second now when he's booting up the system. Then you will see he sends off all the standard salt stuff like go collect the package list, refresh. I said refresh package list. So he knows what's installed, and then he will come and flag and say, hey, this guy needs so any second now he will send out some more salt stuff. Because on the first boot, he sends out a bunch of salt stuff that he then has to go do. And then the machine will show up and we will say, hey, is he up to date or not? And now he's basically part of it. Refresh hardware. If you work with SUSE Manager on salt, you know this thing where you can refresh the hardware. Goes and reads how many CPU and cores and memory and all of that stuff. So he will start doing that. So that just takes, see, there you go. There were some more tasks that came in here now. And I was never good with patience of waiting for stuff. So he will now go ahead and do that. All right? So I now stolen 7 minutes of your break. Any questions?
What does actually creating the images look like? It's been a long time since I created a new image for a register. Is that a simple thing to do?
Yes.
How do you go about creating it and testing it?
Can you read that from where you're sitting? Or one more? Like that?
Yeah.
All right, so the images are basically underneath the images here. So one of the things you would do first is you would create a profile. So let's take this classical. So here's a profile. There's a name for it. Obviously, you can't change this key you built. You can't change the store either. That's also default. Then there's the location. So I was lazy. Did I mention that? No patience, and I'm lazy. So I just cloned our GitHub. So we have these image profiles available, the ones that you saw I'm using, graphical and terminal. But there's no logins in there. None. Because we're not allowed to. So as a company, as a person, I'm allowed to have a config file with a password in, so I did that. Okay, so I just basically created that, and then you point it to that GitHub directory where your config XML file is. All right, and then at the bottom you say which activation key do I want to use. Okay, so you do know you can name the activation keys correct names, right? You don't have to accept that long default. I always give it names so I know what it is. Okay, much easier. And once you've done that, that's the profile. Okay, once you have a profile, you can then go into the build, and then you would say, well, which profile do I want to build? I want to build that one. It tells you over here what it is. Okay, it tells you what software channels is being used for that profile based on the activation key. So you'll see my stuff here is older. I based everything on SP3 and 324 SUSE Manager. And I've got everything working. I'm like, I ain't touching this until after SUSECON. Okay. So then you'll go in and you'll select the build host, and then standard SUSE Manager. Do you want it now? Do you want it later as part of an action chain? You say build. And then the SUSE Manager will send that request via Salt to the build host, and the Kiwi will build it. Once it's done building, part of the Salt stuff is it pulls it back in as an image and available to you. Okay. Why do we keep us separate? Do we recommend using Kiwi on a separate host? Because Kiwi has to run as root. Has to, otherwise it won't work. And obviously you don't want to do that because you're using an image. We can't control what you do in the image. So that's our recommendation. And that's it. And once you have it, you will have your images in here. And even though the image is not deployed, you can see it says it's built, and it will even tell you already now the image, how bad is it in terms of patches and packages. Not the client, the image. So all of these features is what you get. And a lot of this image stuff was already in SUSE Manager. What wasn't there was the Kiwi stuff. Remember, the image stuff was there for containers and other things. We just added the Kiwi components to it. All right. Cool. Any other questions? So if there is anything, you've seen the technology showcase out there, we can come show you more there. I think we will all be there tonight. I think it is. I think I got duty tonight as well, or at some point today. So I'll also be there some of the day. So if you got any questions, whatever, just come by, and we'll happily do it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it.